Thanks, Susan. That was magnificent. My, we see what great speaking skills you have. Is there a speech? Is there a speech in your future?
Maybe.
The title of our lesson today comes with a question. Who are you really? When you hear that question, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Maybe your name, your ethnicity, your gender. Maybe it's your zodiac sign, your background, anything. Who are you really? Who am I really? When asked that question, people often think of their station in life, like their career, their volunteering, or the roles they take on. Parent, partner, grandparent, caretaker. I first heard that question, who are you really, as the title of a book published in the 90s by a nutritionist from New York City, who did an interesting expose on 7 different personality types that he had observed in his lifetime. And in the back of the book, there was a little questionnaire that you filled out to determine which personality you have. To my best recollection, that was the very first personality test I ever took, and I was hooked. I loved it. And being an astrologer, of course, that's right down my alley, personalities. How many of you have ever taken a personality test? Oh, quite a few. And how about Briggs-Meyer? Yeah, okay, that was the second one I took. With Briggs-Meyer, you know that your personality type is drawn down to 4 letters of the alphabet. And if your type starts with an I, you're supposed to be an introvert. And if it starts with an E, you're supposed to be an extrovert. Notice I said supposed to be, because all it is a test, right? Another popular personality test is Enneagram, where your personality is assessed as a number ranging from 1 to 9. After I took that test, how easy it was to say, oh, I'm a and that one's a 9, and that one's a 7. And clearly, the message here is to be careful of labeling ourselves and others, no matter in what way, where we tend to think that the label is who we are. So getting back to the question, who are you really? Who am I really? Let's take a look at the psychologists. What do they say? They certainly use personality tests, but basically they say that we humans are a combination of thoughts and emotions, of head and heart, all of which combine to make us who we are in our reactions and our behavior. And what about anthropologists? What do they say about who we really are? Well, specifically, anthropologists say that we are a species called Homo sapiens, and we are of the human race. And then getting down to bare bones, what do the physicists say who we are? Well, on a very basic level, they say that we are mostly composed of a bunch of atoms. About 99% of the physical body is made up of atoms. Hydrogen, carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen. If you ask me, the whole thing sounds a little cold, but that's the answer from the physicists. When we take all this information about who we are, it's easy to get carried away about our human physical existence. And when looking at the meat and potatoes of life, most people would say that each of us is a human being living in a physical body on planet Earth. That's it. Simple. However, today my wish is to entertain the notion that there's a lot more to the question of who we really are. And being a new thought, I bet you know where I'm going with this, right? as we sit here in Centers for Spiritual Living and ponder the question of our identity, we arrive at a bit of a different answer compared to the psychologists and the scientists. Who we are becomes much more expansive as we start to look at a whole other side of ourselves, that of the spiritual. So what do the spiritual teachers say? Well, basically, they start with the premise that who we truly are is not of this earthly realm. It's not our physical existence. They say that the truth of our being is spirit, because that's the part of us that never dies. The spirit within is the real deal. Bottom line, when we remove ourselves from the earthly labels of who we think we are, it provides an opportunity to move beyond appearances. And when we separate ourselves from labels, we automatically catch a glimpse of the spiritual realm. And that's when we begin to see the truth of our being. Believe it or not, both scientists and spiritual teachers, two very different camps, are on the same page about one basic theory, that everything in the universe is interconnected as part of a universal life force. Spiritual teachers call it spirit. They say that who we truly are is not of the physical. It's not our bodies, it's not our minds. They say that we are a piece of this universal life force that transcends time and space. Some call this force the energy of God. Others call it source, or life itself, or spirit. Even though we all have an outer physical being, we humans instinctively long to reunite with our inner being, our true self, also known as divine spirit. So the question comes up about why we have this yearning to align with our authentic spiritual self. Because it feels natural. It feels like we have come home. Here is another undeniable truth. Each of us is born into this life with individuation and free will. But at origin, we all come from the same source, the same essence. When we recognize ourselves as part of this one life, there's a huge payoff. In the oneness, we begin to feel less separated because of the awareness of spirit in everyone and everything. Now, all of this spiritual talk stirs up a special story about someone who many of us knew here at Circle's Edge. Who remembers Dick Fennelly? For those of you who never had the honor of meeting Dick, he was a longtime member of Circle's Edge who passed away last year. 2 words best describe Dick: sweet and chatty. You get the picture? Dick. Despite the health issues that began to pile up, Dick made a point of coming to church as often as he could. But over time, as fate would have it, Dick's health began to fail, with one thing after another, which which for the most part prevented him from attending Sunday service. But on one of his better days, Dick was able to make it, which was wonderful for everyone, including myself, because his presence reminded me of some of the great conversations he and I had had. And on this particular Sunday, when Dick returned, I had to leave right after the service because of an appointment. And as I was on my way out the front door, the front door, I saw Dick in the hallway. And as I was on my way out the front door, he looked at me, but his eyes told me that he would have liked to talk. But instead of stopping, even for a minute, regrettably, I just kept going out that door. I wasn't thinking. And as the day progressed, I didn't feel so good about the choice I had made earlier that morning. But the good news is that, largely because of New Thought principles, rather than wallowing in negative emotion, I turned it around and made a promise to myself that the next time I saw Dick, we would have that chat. A few weeks later, all of us got word that Dick was in the hospital, but receiving visitors. And for me, it was a silver lining so that he and I could have that chat. Well, a few days later, I took an afternoon to go with Kate to the hospital to visit Dick. And when we arrived, immediately upon entering the room, there he was, vintage Dick, talking up a storm. But even with all his exuberance filling up the room, it didn't take long to realize that Dick did not know who I was. And he barely recognized Kate, who had been there the day before. Even though I was happy to see Dick in such good spirits, in my humanness, I felt disappointed that we might not reconnect in the way I had envisioned. In that moment of feeling let down, what came next was unexpected. Out of the blue, my intuition started to speak, reminding me of what the spiritual teachers have been saying for thousands of years, that who we truly are at core is not our physical self, but rather spirit, the part of us that never dies. As the teaching came through, I felt better, much more at peace. Not only that, I began to see Dick in a different light. The whole experience brought me to a place of communicating with him on a much deeper level than I could have ever imagined. As I stood there in his hospital room, what came was a recollection of who Dick really is, which is spirit and of the light. And as that happened, I was able to communicate with him on an entirely different level. In fact, I spoke to him telepathically, having all the faith in the world that he would know exactly what I was saying. About a week later, Dick passed away at home, which is what he wanted. And I also got what I had wanted. A fantastic visit and reconnection with Dick. Undoubtedly, this experience was truly spiritual. But it also gave me hope for any situation where a friend or loved one does not recognize me. Within each and every one of us is our true essence, that of spirit, which transcends time and space. The point is that you can have a conversation or an energy exchange with anyone or anything at any level, whether in the physical or in the spiritual realm. When we think of that question, who am I, from a spiritual perspective, what also comes up is the power of now. You'll hear spiritual teachers say that being present is the embodiment of spirit. Everything just is in this moment. And as we look at the value of this teaching, it brings to mind the story of the peaceful warrior. Has anyone seen the movie or read the book? A couple people. All right. This guy's a gymnast. It's a story about a young gymnast named Dan, who people view as having it all. Good grades, at a great college, young ladies who want to hang out with him, and that's putting it mildly, and a shot at the Olympics. That's how good he is. And with everything going for him, Dan knows that he should be happy, but he's nowhere near feeling that way. Not even close. Dan works hard, trains 7 days a week, 50 weeks out of the year. He's aware that he could be the best in the world and win the Olympic gold. But what gets in his way is that he constantly overthinks everything. He fears failure, or that his success will be taken away if he does make it. So as he lives in this morass, this quagmire of self-doubt, he starts to develop insomnia. And it was during one of his sleepless nights when he meets up with an older gentleman who runs a service station, a gas station attendant. But don't let that fool you. As they get to know each other, Dan sees that this guy is quite the philosophical dude, which brings him to give the guy a nickname. He starts to call him Socrates. But that's not all. Socrates has certain physical strengths and abilities that Dan can only dream of for himself. So he convinces Socrates to take him under his wing and teach him what he knows. Dan wants to go to the Olympics. As the relationship progresses, Dan and Socrates get into some very deep talks about Dan's true identity. Just who is he really? Then comes a crisis, and this story is adapted after a true story of Dan Millman, the author of this book. Dan is in a traffic crash that shatters his legs. He's a gymnast. This totally challenges his bright future. And with Dan literally on his back, Socrates coaches him about everything he needs to know about how to recover. But also, the goal of Socrates is for Dan to find true inner peace, which is the path of the peaceful warrior. Socrates coaches Dan not only about regaining his physical strength, but also about certain metaphysical truths revolving around the power of now. Dan comes to see that the greatest power we have, and the greatest power in the universe, lies in the present moment. It's all about being present. And with the help of Socrates, Dan fully recovers. He's back to his gymnastics and doing exceptionally well. At the very end of the movie, Socrates asks Dan 3 simple questions to see how well he has learned the teachings. With abundant joy, Dan successfully answers every question correctly. First question from Socrates, he asks Dan, "What time is it?" To which Dan responds, "It's now." Second question, "Where are you?" Dan says, "I'm here." Last question, and the most important one, which reflects our topic today. Socrates asks, "Who are you?" To which Dan responds, "I am the moment." And to summarize this teaching, we ask, what time is it? It's now. Where are you? I'm here. Who are you? I'm the moment. Now, these questions and answers can seem a little mind-bending on this physical plane, but when you play with them, there's great value, because you come to see and feel what spirit is all about. Even though Dan did not end up going to the Olympics, what he gained by taking this path was peace of mind, confidence, and enjoyment of his life. And by working with Socrates, he came to see who he truly was, which transcended all that he knew of himself before he met his wise teacher. And whatever name we give it, spirit, the moment, essence, what matters is that we remember who we truly are. Because that remembrance provides a foundation and a comfort level for all that we encounter on this earthly plane. And going forward, I wish each and every one of you the highest and best of everything that your hearts desire, and the joy of knowing spirit, which is the truth of our being. Namaste.